you mind just giving a quick overview of
No,
your
not at all.
transition from the corporate sector to the IBEW?
Yeah. So, well, one, it started like I'm a child of union families. Both my grandfathers were union members. My one grandfather, my maternal grandfather, was a union leader for a canning factory. My paternal grandfather was a union roofer. He ended up starting his own business, non-union, and did that for a career. But my dad, my mom's brother, became a union electrician, and then my dad became a union electrician because he was a non-union roofer in his early 20s. And when he started a family, he needed a career with benefits to take care of his kids in medical, right? He couldn't just depend on the fluctuations of the roofing economy at the time. So he got in to become a union electrician as well, a member of the IBEW, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. And from that, he ended up being able to build a life that they were able to buy a home, raise three kids, me and my two brothers, send me and my brothers to some of the best private schools in Southern California, put us through college, right? Some of that was financial aid and scholarships and things like that, but was able on a middle class income to have a home in a nice neighborhood, to send us to college, to be able to do things like send us abroad, allow us, take some trips like that. And so I went to school, went to Syracuse, got my Bachelor of Science in Economics, floundered a little bit for a few years, ended up working, got into like corporate accounting, and then into the corporate finance side, a little bit more planning. And then after a few years of doing that, I just realized I was really unhappy. I was working with a bunch of people who were super awesome. I really enjoyed working with the people, and I hated the work. And I realized, okay, this is not for me. And one day I looked out across the window, and on the 11th, 12th floor in another building across the way, I saw a couple of guys working on a rooftop, and I was like, I got to do something different than this, right? And I was like, luckily I have my degree, I have this work history a little bit. If it doesn't work out, I can always come back and figure something else. But at the time, I remember I told my mentor I was 30, single, no kids, and I told him, I was like, if I'm going to do something different, it's got to be now. Like, I don't know what my passion is, but it's not this. And I could do this for 30 years and then look back and go, why did I spend 30 years doing this? And so if I got to make a change, the change is now. And he told me, he goes, yeah, man, I get it. He goes, do it. If it doesn't work out, let me know and we'll figure something out, man. And so luckily I had a good relationship with him. And I felt like the way I approached work, try to always be
That was a
respectful.
mentor at work?
Yeah, a mentor of mine who was a high level executive. And and he was really cool about it. And but so I wasn't sure what trade I wanted to get into, so I just kind of applied to the trade that my father was in electrical, and it's turned out to be the best for me. So I applied to the union. It took me about a year from application to finally starting my apprenticeship, and that was in 2016. I started my apprenticeship, so it's been about a little over 7 years now a couple of years as a journeyman electrician, and So now one of the cool things about my union as a construction electrician is for my union, I'm allowed to, every union runs their things differently, but for us, construction electricians with the IBEW, once you get a journeyman ticket, you can travel to other locals. And I don't apply for jobs. I go to my union hall, and when they have jobs that when companies need more guys, they call their local union hall and say, I need 4 guys. And the next guy up on the books is the next guy who takes the call. Now, we're all supposed to have a certain level of training and skill set. And so as a traveler, I'm allowed there's other places around the country where sometimes work's slow, sometimes work's good. So people will travel around for work, and we all get the same training, essentially. We have a national training program. So we hit a certain level of journeyman wireman electricians. We have the same skill set. And so we can go anywhere and pretty much do the job anywhere in the country. And so luckily, I had to move out to Hawaii recently for some not family issues, but family health stuff to be with my folks. And luckily I was able to come out here and I got a job right away. The work was good out here. And so, it's been great. And I've been able to have that access where it wasn't like I had to drop my career and then fly somewhere else and apply for another job and do interviews and hopefully get a job. And I'm only going to be here for X amount of time and I don't know what my situation is. Like, to have that flexibility, to have that ability to do that thing has been really beneficial for me. And also just getting more active in the labor movement within my union has been pretty amazing. Like, meeting like-minded people. I think for me, for a sense of work, it gave that extra, not just the the manual labor aspect of it. They're like, what's really nice is the tangible aspect of it too. It's like at the end of the day, it's not just a report. It's like I could see what I finished that day. It's also nice to not have to do emails at the. It's like, well, I'll get to it tomorrow.
Must be nice.
My day is done. Like I can't do anything else today. It's over. So that's cool. But then also to have the labor movement aspect of it, and to be active in the labor movement and be a part of those things to try to progress and try to help other people fight for living wages and fight for a better lifestyle is pretty great. And have that kind of philosophically, kind of spiritually gives me a little boost of energy as well. I feel like I'm fighting for what I believe in. So that's been pretty cool.
What do you think will happen going back to the UAW strike? What do you think the outcome of that will be?
I think what's happening with the Teamsters strike, and what they got with UPS was really significant. I think what's happening with SAG and the Writers Guild is very significant. I think UAW is going to come out on top. You know, like anything, it's a bet, but I think the way the UAW has, my understanding how they've handled their strike fund and the way they're doing this strike strategically, this not a sit-down, we're calling it a stand-up strike, right? Where they're hitting certain plants in the supply chain to effectively to minimize how many people are out of work. It's very strategic to minimize how many people are going to be out of work. But already, I was reading earlier today that like Ford told another plant in Michigan 600 workers to stay home with another 2,000 on standby to sit home. So it's already, they're saying fine. It's like they're going to try to play hardball, but I think the UAW, the way the writer's strike are holding it, going, you know what? We've reached our breaking point. We're not doing this anymore. This is not sustainable. This is not acceptable. And if this is the time where we got to go to the Mets, then we're going to go to the Mets, and we'll see how this goes. But I think what I worry about, I guess, is management hasn't learned a lesson, right? From the financial crisis getting like at the end of the day, we're going to get bailed out, right? We're going to get bailed out. Look at the financial industry and what happened after 2008. We know we're getting bailed out. It doesn't matter. No one went to jail for all the stuff that happened. The smartest people who should have prevented all this can mismanage shit all the way. But at the end of the day, it's like, well, but I did a good job though. It's like, no, you destroyed a whole industry. Like, yeah, but I deserve money for that. Like the mental gymnastics you have to do to think like you deserve that much money for destroying entire industries and economies, and think you're justified in still getting to own that much, and that you're worth that much is crazy to me. But I think there's also that shift happening, which I hope is this. What I would like to see that is like a philosophical shift of the way we value capital in this country into valuing labor, right? That all work is respectable work. Just because it's been on my mind, I thought I don't know if you saw that last couple of days, there's been those interviews with the CEO of Ford and the CEO of GM. And they're talking about like, well, one was the CEO of GM. What's her name? Mary
Barra, I think.
Yeah. Mary Barra or something like that. Barra. And how they were just like, she kind of just did the PR rep like they're after about like, but you made like 30 million last year and your company made this billions in profits. Like, shouldn't they get some of that? They're like, well, you know, we're giving them a 20% increase. Like, well, you got a 34% increase. Like, well, my compensation is based on performance. It's like, so like answer the question, right? Like the workers have gotten you this performance. It's not all management, right? The workers make this stuff. Like they should get a cut of it. And it's not even like the workers are asking for the majority of the cut, right? It's not like, in my opinion, it's not like it's a socialist policy or a communist policy going, hey, we're doing the means, we get the lion's share of this money. It's just saying like, give us what we think is a fair share. I mean, labor's already even conceding the fact like, okay, you're management, you get higher wages for being management. Give us our cut. Like, just give us our cut. And I think like the fight to that I find to be pretty shocking.
Yeah, because my understanding is that when the financial crisis happened in 2008 and the big three were kind of collapsing, the Obama administration went to bail them out, but asked for a lot of sort of haircuts all around. Like, I don't know if you
conceded, right?
Yeah, I think there were concessions that management made on, I don't know, shit that they had to do, but then also the union took huge cuts because they knew that it was required to save the companies. And now the companies are making huge amounts of profits, and the unions are still locked into those contracts from 2008 or 2009 where they were getting a huge haircut. But they were also,
Well,
one of the demands I saw, they were looking for a 4-day work week.
yeah,
Did you see that?
I did. Now, I haven't seen the specifics on the 40 week. If they just want to go down to, I don't think it's they want to go down to 32 hours. Is it 32 hours or 35 hours?
30, yeah, around that.
32. Yeah, the thing is interesting though is like you see these studies that are coming out of Europe, right? I think it was Iceland and even certain firms in England that are cutting down to 35-hour work weeks or 32-hour work weeks, and they're seeing that production isn't going down, right? Like, I mean, this is an office work, right? But the same thing happens with physical labor as well. Like you can only, even like I was just working a job recently that we were doing 12, 16-hour days, and it's like it's known you're going to get a drop in production the longer you work, right? So you can only maintain a certain amount of production level for so long before you're going to get a drop off. So even if you're in a time crunch and you're going to work 12 hours or 16 hours, yeah, you'll get some production, but the rate of production you're going to get falls off after a certain amount of time. So I hear the argument about, well, it's less work. You're going to be getting less done. But if you can be more productive in that time, right? Like because you can it's like basically a sprint versus a marathon, right? If your race is now shorter, you can maintain a quicker pace for a longer period of time than you could if it was a longer race. I think that's the argument. So I don't think the 8 hours, how much are you? I don't think you really know the effects of it till you implement it and see what you get. In my opinion,
Yeah, I guess
because I
because
think a lot of times
they probably measure the output per vehicle or per whatever, right? Like if you have auto
right.
workers working in a factory, there's probably all sorts of people at management that came from McKinsey or whatever who are measuring how much output that they're getting per hour. So just playing the devil's advocate, if they're taking it from 40 hours to 32, they would, are they arguing that they would have the same output that they would have?
See, now here's the thing though that I think until you work a physical labor job, there's certain things working a corporate job you don't get, right? And
Yeah.
I just say that just from an advantage point of being in both situations, right? Is that when you do a physical labor job, a manual labor job all day, like it taxes you, but there's certain things that'll keep a team motivated to produce at a high level, right? And this is what I found in terms of management. So if you get guys who are like, no, if you're giving me 10 units of production per hour, then I want 80 units a day, right? And it's like, okay, but now if a crew is running really quick, hey, we can get you those same 80 units in maybe 6 hours, right? And then that manager will come in and go, instead of just taking the 80 units at the 6 hours, they'll go, well, if you gave me 80 units in 6 hours, I should be getting those extra units in hours 7 and 8. So give me more units now. And it's like, whoa. It doesn't work like that. Like we're human beings. We're not machines. Our production works in a certain way, right? You need rapport. You need good morale, right? It's funny how little things will make a difference. You bring donuts on Friday and a crew has pretty much performed. So it's like, hey, thank you for the donuts, man. Let's get to work and let's kick ass today, right? But if every day your boss is on your ass, well, F this dude. Like, I'm not getting paid more per unit. He is. And if he wants to just
Yeah,
crack the
that's a
whip,
good
well, if
point.
you're going to give me nothing but stick and no carrot, what's my incentive for doing more? And
Yeah,
your
because the
argument is, well,
management,
you should because I'm the boss. Like, come on. I know you're getting a cut on bonuses, and I don't. So, where's the reciprocation? And you're not really working out for me. You're just hammering me so you can get more, and that's not a good motivation factor, in my opinion, for a crew, right? For a team.
yeah,
Now, hey, I've seen it on the other end where a guy goes home early for work because he has a doctor's appointment or he wants to see his kid's baseball game or something like that, right? And his boss, fudges the time card a little bit and he dipped out an hour early, but his check's not short because he gave him a full 40 for the week. That pays dividends. That pays dividends on the other end when, hey, we got 3 more minutes at the end of the day and I can go, hey, yeah, that's overtime now. Now you owe me a full hour, but I don't mind doing the extra 3 minutes because you gave me it on the other end, right? I'll give you that because I know you're looking out for me. You've helped me out and in my life and in ways that don't show up on time cards that are not measurables for management statistics. But that's the difference of dealing with people of production versus just, oh, this is production on a chart and I need XYZ. But you got to know how to
Yeah,
manage people.
it's a good point about management and performance bonuses because they, I'm assuming, if they work like the rest of corporate America, are getting huge performance bonuses depending on how the company is doing and that sort of thing. But my assumption is that the UAW is not getting performance bonuses. It's just whatever's locked
No,
into the contract, right?
that's my understanding. And then there's certain things like I was reading something, and I haven't dug into the full details of their contract, but it was one guy was saying that he had to work 18 years at Ford before he became a full-time employee. So they just kept him in like limbo as like a certain status. So basically, the guy's been there 20 years. He probably knows more than he's probably one of the more valuable guys on the job there. And just because they could keep him in limbo, they did, right? And now you want that guy to, hey, you got to understand the company and you got to be for the company. Why should he be for the company? You kept him in limbo for 20 years and not give him what he's probably due. You know what I mean? Or
Yeah.
if someone's that not that good and you're going to keep him around for 20 years, to me that's also a sign of bad management. Either let the person go or he's valuable. You doing that is just to me an exploitation of your workforce. It's not providing. Where's the if we're a merit-based society, if you're going to reward people for producing, how are you going to keep that guy for 20 years in the same spot and not give him full-time status? That's just taking advantage of a guy for 18 years, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Right? And then afterwards, you want to say, oh, but you got to understand my position. No, I don't have to understand shit. If everything's for the company's the bottom line, and they'll drop you at a dime. Why would you expect workers to have a different approach to you? Like, I think the cat was kind of let out of the bag. There was a clip on Twitter that was going around of a CEO at some conference talking about, oh, since COVID, workers been at home, and we got to get them back to understand that we're the boss. You got to listen to what I say. And it's like, oh, I think that was a little bit of the veil lifting. Like, this really is the mentality that sits, in my opinion, in management and corporate America. These workers should be thankful for me for giving them this job. I deserve this money. They don't. I'm this valuable. They aren't. They don't understand what I do. And there's no there's no understanding of what their team does, the people below them does. There's no, right? I think it's a societal thing at large. I'll go kind of tangent, right? I think it's,
Yeah.
we're both kids of the 80s, right? So child grow up. But my understanding of talking of my grandparents when they were around or older generations, the 50s, 60s, and 70s was about a collective movement in America about building up the middle class. And it wasn't for everybody, right? But you still see a movement of the civil rights movement. And everyone's kind of like, hey, we're moving together and we're moving up. We're building this middle class. And that, to me, I get a sense of that the Reagan era turned from a collective, us as a people, to individualism and you go get yours and screw everybody else. Where
Well, he fired the air traffic controllers at the beginning of his administration.
I mean, like, the hypocrisy, right? This is supposed to be a free capitalist and free market society, but I'm going to go in here and I'm going to insert government into a market between labor and management in this industry, right? The hypocrisy of it, but it doesn't matter. Get yours. You can see it now, even with the people we idolize. Like, I've had conversations with people that are like, oh man, it's so smart. Look at how rich that person is. Look at that. It's all about wealth. It's not about how you created your wealth. It's not about what you do for a living to create that wealth. It's just about having wealth. Gives you a cachet, right? I mean, look at Donald Trump. The way he does business has never been ethical. No one accuses Donald Trump of being an ethical businessman. But people admire him. They go, but he's a great businessman. Look at how much money he has. And he doesn't even have that, right? He just lies about his wealth too. But people are like, but he has that much money though. I mean, there's no reality to it. So I think with COVID, I think you are seeing this movement overall of people who work who go, I don't want to be a business owner. I want to be able to, I haven't found my thing that drives me in the way that it does for a lot of business owners, right? That I have this thing and I want to make money. It's like, there's a lot of people out there who just want to work a 40-hour week or a 35-hour work week and make enough to live in a decent place, maybe take a vacation once or twice a year and raise a family. And looking at that, I think there's people who look at that and go, you're lazy. You don't want more. It's like, why is that not enough? Why is that not sufficient for people to enjoy life? How are we the richest economy in the world and have people living on the streets? Like, the paradigm, I think, is shifting, and it's slowly, and more people, I think, are seeing that perspective since COVID, since they had the time to kind of reset at home and reevaluate their life. That's what I'm noticing. And I think people are going, yeah, I'd rather work for a union, and I don't want to be a millionaire. I want to just be able to enjoy my life and enjoy my family and friends, and not feel like I'm grinding all the time just to barely make it. For what purpose?
Yeah.
What joy am I getting from that? And I think this goes into the thing even about, you talk about estate tax or the death tax, whatever you want to call it, in the marketing sense. But the the reality is, and I have a conversation with guys who are working class people who are like, I shouldn't have to pay any taxes on what I want to give to my kids and this and that. And it's like, but I'm not talking about what you're giving to your kids, like you passing down your house to your kids. And look, I live in Los Angeles, or I'm working now in Hawaii, where these values of properties are insane now, right? Because of the housing demand. So the value of this money gets up into the millions now, and now you're talking this tax that's going to get applied to it. But what I'm really talking about is the people who want to give their kids $20 million, $30 million, $50 million, and not have to pay high taxes on that. It's like, are we a country that believes you work on your merit and move forward and your success is based on that? Or do you just give someone, like, you really don't have to do anything if you just inherit $100 million, right? Like, just having the $100 million makes you a power player, just inherently. So I think just getting that, how is that any different than what we had than monarchies and noble classes, right? Like, we need to shift away from that, and like, your work should determine your value, your ideas should be the merit, and all work is respectable work, whether that, and like I say, we were talking about that separation in class and divide, like the way the professional class, the quote unquote corporate class, looks at manual labor as something that they're above, that they wouldn't go dig a ditch, even though there's guys out there digging ditches who make $200,000 a year as operators, right? Like, that's not a bad living, man, if you're willing to dig a ditch. But it's a way we look down on a service class, or people who actually work. It's like, oh, I'm above that. My hands are clean. I don't have to get into the dirt. I don't have to get dirty. And I don't know. I'd like to see that breakdown and say, like, no, what are you willing to work for, right? Even if you're a janitor, that deserves respect, right? You keep that
Yeah.
office clean. You let people work in an environment that lets them work, right? Like, that's a respectable job too. All work should be respected. And so I'd like to see a move from that. Even when we talk about tax, you can go into tax structure, like, we should be valuing labor, not capital, right? Labor should be getting, your labor income should be getting taxed at the capital gains tax, not the other way around. I mean, philosophically, that's a more economical argument, talking about the incentive structures and what's that going to do for an economy and all that kind of, that's a whole different kind of discussion. But I just think philosophically, the approach to it should be one of valuing labor and work, not capital.
And a couple of things on that. One thing that you were saying a moment or two ago made me think that there's not a lot of class consciousness in this country the way they have in some European countries and around the rest of the world, where there's sort of that working class pride, the working class hero that John Lennon sang about. But I think there's also been a bigger trend of, you were talking about back in the day, in the 50s and the 60s, the Democratic Party was the party of the working class and the party of unions and all that. And then there's been a trend since the turn of the century. They call it educational polarization in the literature, where the Democrats have sort of become a managerial class, where it's people with
The more
bachelor's
educated, right?
degrees and master's. Yes. Yeah.
The
Because
more
it
educated
used
you
to
are, the
be,
more liberal you are. Yeah.
well, more,
Or
yes. Yeah.
you
Yes.
you
Yeah.
trend that way, right? The further your education goes, the more likely you are to be a liberal or progressive in that kind of route.
Yeah. And it used to be that up through the late 90s, people with a college degree were more likely to be Republican than Democrat. But then something kind of switched sort of gradually and all of a sudden, and it's happening across the industrialized world too, but where you have people who went to college are then going to consulting firms and becoming management corporations and becoming less sort of the party of the working class. They're still liberal socially. They want to vote for Obama and Biden and all that, but there's less of a sort of affiliation with the working class. There's almost a looking down on the working class. And there's, in my experience, a complete disconnect with the importance of unions. I mean, I know a lot of people in DC who are extremely liberal. They've never voted for a Republican in their life. They, they'll have the flag with everything on it now, and the stickers and
Oh
all
yeah.
that. But they, if you ask them about unions, it's just a sort of, yeah, I don't know. That's sort of a thing of the past,
Well, it's
and
because
it's a shame.
they're not a part of one though, right? And their family generally, it's like our generation that's coming up and taking on those management positions now, right? People in their 30s, 40s, and the boomer generation, people in their the late boomer generation now, probably in their late 50s, early 60s, right? And Generation X, probably in their 40s and 50s. But it's, to me, it's like those, our generation was not from families of unions generally, right? It was our parents' generation that came from, were children of unions and what those provided, right? And at least that's what it seems like to me. I should probably look at the research more in depth before I just make
No,
that
that's true.
statement outright.
Yeah.
But that's the sense I get. And but the other thing I noticed you're saying, this disconnect from the unions, is it's not just a disconnect from unions and work class. It's also a disconnect, like socially, between people who choose to go into trades or manual labor, right? And the kind of living that that can provide. And there's a disconnect even just of awareness of it, right? That you can have someone who's an accountant making $65,000, $70,000 a year, and have, but that class of accountant or what we call, right, that quote unquote professional class working in corporate America, sales reps, middle managers, accounting, right, making 65, 70, $80,000 a year, have no idea that there are plumbers out there, that there are electricians, that there are carpenters who make $120,000, $150,000 a year, that make double what they make. But there's just such a lack of awareness because those worlds don't intermix. Because not only has it become the separation between it, there's like socially it's a different thing. It's like what you're good at almost separates you, right? You go to you if you're in academia, you go to college and then you get exposed to certain things like the arts. And to me, I get the sense, right? Again, it's a generalization, but my experience has been people. It's like this tribalism that forms, right? And you get into
Yeah.
and you go into the arts and you go see and you read more and you do more things. And there's some people out there who are not into books necessarily, and they go out and they fish and they hunt and they live outdoors and they do those things. And then those worlds never mix because you don't socially interact in that sense. And so you just, everyone goes into your tribes again, and the disconnect gets bigger and bigger. And what's harder now, I think, is what I notice is people in, I would say just the trades, because that's what I'm exposed to more now. People, it's a social thing, right? The same thing with the way religion goes or politics. This identity goes like, oh, I'm not one of these snooty elites who thinks they're better than I mean, there's shirts that go around. It's like I'm a high class scumbag, right? And guys wear these shirts proud about being, yeah, I go hunt and I go ride ATVs. But a lot of people have no idea. These guys make, I know guys who make $300,000, $400,000 a year working in the trades on high end projects. They demand 70-hour weeks, 80-hour weeks, for 6-7 months at a time. And these guys go out and they'll grind, and women too, right? I'll say there's a lot of badass sisters out there who do some crazy work, and they get paid, and they get paid really well for what they do. But it's a look down when you're unfamiliar with another set of work. You think, oh, that's just manual labor. There's no skill set involved. There's no thinking involved. And some of these fields especially now, are getting extremely technical, and you have to have skills and knowledge to do that kind of work. So this disconnect just keeps growing. I think you see it across all American life in all these different sectors. We kind of keep segregating into our tribes, and we don't have this crossover between each other. And I think that makes the divide seem bigger than what they actually are. But you get in those identities, and same people even in unions go, I don't want to vote Democrats. I don't want to vote liberal, even though I think those policies stand out for unions because they don't identify with those people. They don't understand.
They don't identify culturally, right?
Culturally, that's not my tribe, man. Those people aren't for me. Even if policy-wise, the economic incentives benefit you, it doesn't matter at a visceral level, right? It's the same thing you see like in these, like when I think Jordan Klepper does those Trump interviews, right? And it's like he's talking to people and they're like, I wish we would just raise the level of respect in our dialogue, and the guy's wearing a "fuck you liberals" hat, right? Like just an unawareness. And so you just kind of you just know in your gut what's right. You don't have to look. I feel it. I know it's right. It's how do you convince someone that feeling of they're right, that that's my group, they're looking out for me? Doesn't matter what the reality is. That's what that feeling is, and it's hard to break that.
Yeah, one interesting political development over the last 2 or 3 cycles is the the Republicans have had the white working class for a little while now, but Trump made pretty big inroads in 2020 with black and Hispanic working class voters. Not huge, but it's a trend that is sort of defying the tradition of, especially for black voters, being overwhelmingly voting for Democrats. But you're seeing it start to switch just on the class level. So the working class moving a little more toward Republicans, but higher class saying Democrats. You're seeing that with Hispanics as well. And you can see that the Democrats are a little confounded by it because it's true. I mean, arguably the economic policies of the Democrats are more beneficial for, I'd say, almost everyone. But even just the
Oh,
NLRB, the
I mean,
National Labor
yeah.
Relations
As I
Board,
was saying, you just look at the
Biden is,
NLRB and who Trump's appointed versus Biden appointments, right? It makes a
yeah,
world of difference.
or the Department of Labor. Biden put in Marty Walsh, who came up through the unions. Trump had Eugene Scalia, who I think is the son of the late Antonin Scalia, who's just heavily anti-labor. So it's not like the Democrats. People always say the Democrats have turned their back on the working class. I don't think that's quite true, but I think there is a, like you were talking about, that sort of class tribal divide where there's a, like a snootiness, and there's Democrats being clustered in DC and New York and Massachusetts and California.
No,
So you have
but
that
even
regional
even
divide as
like
well.
I think even educationally wise, right? Like I remember I had a discussion with a younger family member who just started college, and she ended up getting into an Ivy League school, and ended up choosing not to go to that Ivy League school just for a few different reasons, right? I think um, an issue of college debt was one of them, and also the idea of the pressure. Like she worked so hard in high school to achieve a certain level, and then wanting to feel like, okay, I know what I want to go into, I know what I want to study and things like that, but do I want another 4 years of this intense pressure on me consistently, or do I want to enjoy some of it?
Well, if
And
you
I
got in an
think,
Ivy League, you might as well.
oh, it depends. But I think there's a thing that you said about also like, and maybe I'm out of line here, but I think you probably experienced. There's a difference between being educated and being intelligent, right? And I think a lot of people mistake those things. The same way I think people think about being rich and being smart or being intelligent. I think like making money is a skill set. It doesn't make. I mean, look at Elon Musk, right? Like to me, sure, he's super wealthy and he's done great at making money, but I don't see wisdom coming out of that guy a lot, in my opinion. Other
Very
people
smart
do.
though. Not wisdom in the classic sort of Greek sense, but very smart guy. I was listening to an interview with Walter Isaacson about his new biography,
Oh,
and
his new book, yeah.
yeah, Elon Musk. I mean, he's got a
Well, I mean,
crazy mind.
I
I think
can't.
he's on the spectrum, so he comes across as a bit awkward and he can be an asshole. But
But like being
uh,
skillful in that sense, like you can be skillful in an area, right? And skillful in making money. And that's what I'm saying. Like that's all luck. You have to have skill to be able to do that. But that doesn't give you, to me, wisdom or insight in all these other aspects of life. It just means you're good at this thing. Like maybe I will take like Elon Musk giving advice on business probably makes sense. Elon Musk giving advice on social issues, maybe not the greatest person to look to, in my opinion, right? And those, but it's like we value money in the society, and so it's like, well, he's rich, he must know everything. He's so rich, he must have all the wisdom, and as opposed to looking at it as a skill set, in my view, just like certain things he's very good at.
just on Musk for a minute, I think it's kind of interesting how people on the left have turned very anti. He's everything has become political in our world. You know, even down to football and things like that. And Elon Musk became this barometer of, if you support him, you're right wing. If you don't, you're left wing. The left, especially the media, seems to really hate him. But if you look at his sort of trajectory, I mean, he's an immigrant. I think he came from a middle class background, but
Oh,
immigrant
no,
that
I think
came
it's
to
like
the
the upper
U.S.
class background in
He
South
was an upper
in South
class
Africa.
background in South Africa. Yeah. But came to this country, built a company dedicated to the clean energy transition. He's building, he made EVs a huge thing when no one else was. And he's focused on sort of taking over the entire EV market, which I think he's dominating at the moment. I'm sure he's socially liberal, but I don't know at what point he became so hated by the left. He does say things that are inappropriate. He bought Twitter and unbanned Trump and Nazis and that sort of thing. And he said he's very big into free speech, but his behavior on Twitter, I don't think
Well, I think it's like one of these.
demonstrates
What is
that.
it? What,
But I
forget.
think the left should support him. I mean, he's
Oh
it's
no,
not like
those
he's out
businesses, it's
building
like
coal factories and
no.
he's
But the
trying to get
idea of
us
like,
to Mars. And
but again, like the idea, even like the hyperloop thing, right? And like certain more
what was the Hyperloop
not.
again? What did he want
It's
to
like
do?
It's like underground tunnels. It's like to eliminate some of the street traffic
Yeah.
and to use.
Did he want to
It's
go? Did he have a plan to go from one
I
city to
I
the
think he's
other?
built already like I think he's already built like 3 miles as a prototype in Los Angeles on the west side. I think like Century City.
There you go. You should
like,
support that as an Angelino.
I do absolutely. But there's a thing of supporting that. Like I said, him and his business ventures is one thing. Him talking about free speech on Twitter and saying like, I don't think anybody should be blocked on Twitter, and then women on Twitter have to tell them like, when you don't get to block people, you get certain creeps who keep following you and doxing you and find your like to not think.
He lets people block you on. You can block people on Twitter. He just unbanned problematic people, but you can still block people.
He was making an argument about blocking. It was just like the discussion. I think I remember, but it's like I think whatever his focus that lets him be so successful in these business ventures. Sometimes you expand it to other things, and it's like his focus is his mindset. He doesn't open that up to other viewpoints. It's like, well, right, and it's like it gets emphasized when people keep telling you you're great, you're great, you're great. Then of course everything I do is great, right? There's no criticism to it, and there's no one checking you saying like, actually, I want to rethink that one, bro. Maybe reset on that and give that a little more thought. But if you're great in all these other fields and everyone keeps saying how great you are, well, why wouldn't you be great in everything else? Why wouldn't you just like, dude, my answers are right everywhere. Like you get no pushback anywhere. You start believing that stuff unless you actively combat that, which is hard to do, right? But I think, So the most thing I find interesting, I think the thing with I think with liberals sometimes there is a reaction. It's this, I had a conversation with a friend about when the LA City Council and the LA County Fed had that thing about the leaked tapes about the few leaders having that conversation where they had racist remarks and things like that.
Yeah, with
right?
Kevin De Leon. And who's the woman? Was she the mayor? She was just they were saying
a councilwoman.
Yeah.
Right. And they were saying all these things.
Will you just explain what that was real quick?
Yeah, so they were at a meeting. It was Nuri Martinez, Kevin De Leon, I forget the other council member, and then there was also the LA County, the head of the LA County Federation of Labor, which is basically the president of the AFL-CIO chapter of Los Angeles. And they were having a conversation. They were caught it was after a meeting, and they were standing next to a mic, and it was a hot mic, and someone recorded it and then released it. But basically, they were talking amongst themselves and saying some pretty racist remarks about commenting on other people and talking about another council member's son or I think it was son or grandson who's half black, and just throwing around just making comments like, oh, they use the grandson as like a token thing, as a symbol for votes, and oh, we hate this person.
I think he was adopted.
I forget what the exact I forget. No, I think it's his. I forget, to be honest with you. I'd have to go back and look at it. But it was the comments were not good, right?
Yeah.
And they should not be said by someone in power. They should not be viewpoints that are held by people in power. The conversation I got with a friend was, and I think they convinced me that they're right in terms of, I think even once that came out, to me, like Kevin De Leon should have resigned. He still hasn't. Right, but he should have. That disqualifies him. He should, if he wanted to run again after the fact, I think that's one thing. But trying to hold on to that position, I think, was the wrong move, morally, I guess. Politically, we'll see what happens, right? But those people, what they've put their actual lifetime of work towards, of helping disadvantaged communities build better lives, right? Does this conversations that they have of what I thought originally is like venting and letting their bias out. Now they should not have been having that conversation. The fact that no one checked each other, like, hey, all right, this is guys, we're going too far here. Let's pump the brakes here. But they got way too comfortable and letting that bias amongst each other just vent out, in my opinion, a little bit of that. It was really inappropriate. It showed that they have these biases, but the history of their work to me doesn't mean that they are inherently like that they want to see one group of people ahead of another, that they actively, like, they are active racists in that sense of trying to promote one group over another. Does it show that they have these heavy biases, that their work could have been better, they could have done different things? Absolutely, right? Like it's like the veil getting lifted. But work, I think, also gets completely thrown out the window because we live in a culture of like, we'll dismiss all of it. Same thing with like Al Franken, right? The pictures of Al Franken that came out where he's touching
Girls' butts.
that the hostess's name, her breast or her butt or whatever.
Oh.
Again, very inappropriate, right? It was on a USO tour. Very inappropriate. Should not be. It's not acceptable behavior for a U.S. senator, right? And the Democrats.
Although he wasn't a senator at the time, and I don't think he was grabbing them. He was pretending to grab them. Still inappropriate, but
very inappropriate. But there's also talk about the inappropriateness he had, like during a scene where they were supposed to kiss, and just problematic behavior in general, right? Now that's not behavior we should have from a U.S. senator, right? Now, also though the work. Now then you got to. Is that excusable? No, he should be out of the Senate. Yes. Then you also look at the terms. Well, hold on.
I disagree, but go on.
Argument. But then no, you look at the Senate and who the opposing side is, and the way the opposing side is governing, and the way they have, you got Jim Jordan, the guy who's been hiding, the guy that kind of, what I see, has been covering up sexual assault against his athletes he was coaching, right?
Yeah.
And
definitely
you get Matt Gaetz, who supposedly might have been having sex with, or hiring underage prostitutes. That story seemed to have kind of vanished in the middle of nowhere. But maybe he didn't do it, right? I don't know. But you have all these things. But any allegations on the right, and it's like, that's our guy. We're sticking with him. We're going for power and control. On the left, it's like, well, no, we can't have that person. We got to get rid of him. It's like you're bringing a knife to a gunfight, and you keep losing, and you wonder why.
But a lot of Democratic senators have said that they regret asking Al Franken to resign. So I think they've come around on that. Just going back to California politics, what's your take on Dianne Feinstein?
Oh, she's had to resign for a long time now. I mean, I think it's ridiculous the fact that she's still a sitting senator. I mean, it's just kind of wild. Like, there's no way that she should be a sitting senator. There's no way. From all the reports that are coming out, the fact that she can't, it seems like they're just wheeling out a body there just because.
Her daughter has power of attorney over her. Did you know that?
I did not know that. I mean, how can you be a sitting senator when someone has power of attorney over you?
And you represent 40 million people, the largest state in the union. There's a clip of her where she was in a committee. You might have seen this. And they were just going around taking a vote, and everyone's supposed to say aye or nay. And she started giving a speech that she had, I think, next to her for something else. And so she had a couple of aides come and try to stop her, but she kept going. Then she had another senator come, and they kept whispering, just say aye, just say aye. And finally she did. And I feel bad. This isn't to mock her, because I think it's unfortunate what's happened to her, and it happened to all of us maybe, but I think it's really inappropriate of the people around her to keep her going so that they can sort of leech off of her. I don't think she's capable of resigning at this point, because I think she might be so cognitively not there that, you know what I mean? Like it takes sort of like Nixon resigned because he sat down and thought about it and said, oh God, I'm fucked. I'm going to resign. But when you're so deteriorated mentally, cognitively, you might not be able to make that decision. Well, so I don't know what they do now.
No, but here's what I don't understand is like the LA Times had a piece on her recently about writing about her legacy and stuff also, just kind of like what they're doing to her. And it's like they want to, it's like, oh, well, we got to keep her in there. It's like, for what? What advantage does her continuing to serve do? You have a California governor. It's a blue state, right? Even if Newsom appoints another Democratic senator, and even if you have an election, it's right highly likely that it's going to be another Democrat in the Senate, right? So it's
Oh,
not like you're going to
100%,
lose.
right?
You're not going to lose any power from the Democratic Party. All you're doing at this point is diminishing her legacy of someone who's lived a long life of service, right? You could disagree with things she's done along her career, but she's given her life to service of someone that should have, in my mind, a legacy of a trailblazing woman in politics in America in the 20th century. And that's all getting diminished now just because. Like there's no real reason. She's not an effective senator in any way. So
Yeah,
why
she's
have it?
just a vote for the Democrats. So you're a lifelong Californian, although now in Hawaii. Who do you want to succeed her after she lives out the rest of her term or resigns?
Well, I haven't been following the race super closely, but as I understand it, kind of the big three candidates for her seat that'll be coming up is between Katie Porter, Barbara Lee, and Adam Schiff.
Yep.
I mean, I know you follow you track this stuff pretty closely, but it's those three pretty much,
I,
right?
yeah, I actually haven't followed it too closely, but those are the big three. And from what I understand, Schiff and Porter, I haven't seen any polls, but I was reading some article about Barbara Lee, and it just said she was trailing in the polls to Schiff and Porter and trailing in fundraising. I didn't see what the actual numbers were, but said they were
I
up.
like Katie Porter. I think. Well, I would say this. I think we do need more women in the Senate. So especially in California, having two female senators for so long, and then having Harris, and then having her become VP, and then now getting Padilla there, I think having two male senators from California, I don't think I would like to see another woman as another senator, because I think it's not like I think Katie Porter or Barbara Lee are bad candidates, right? It'd be somebody who's like just putting the woman in for the sake of a woman. It's like, no, these are qualified candidates as well. And I like Katie Porter a lot, but I do also like Barbara Lee. And I came across something recently, I think with 9/11, talking about how Barbara Lee was the only person in both chambers to vote against the presidential authorization for war powers back
Yeah.
in '01. And it was just kind of like, wow, how like that is somebody. So I need to do more homework on that. But that kind of made me think again, like, you know what, maybe Barbara Lee is the person to have that.
Yeah, that was a
To
good
have the
story, actually.
fortitude. I mean, to have the fortitude to stand up. People forget about what that kind of pressure was at that moment to stand up and say, no, we're not doing this. Like this
There's a
this
good
is crazy.
there's a good This American Life, I think it was, on that, but it was basically a week after 9/11, and she had enormous pressure on her, and 435 people in Congress. She was the only in the House, rather. She was the only one in the House, and then the only one in the obviously both chambers to vote against it. And I guess she had to get, I think she had Secret Service detail for a couple of years after that, because she was getting so many threats against her life for having, you're a terrorist, you're with bin Laden, probably a bunch of racist stuff. But she stood her ground, and then half the chamber has since said that they regret that vote. They're still trying to repeal it because it still stands. And the
Yeah.
vote, for people who were wondering, it was a, basically an authorization, gave Bush the authorization to use military force anywhere in the world where he thinks he's combating terrorism. And she said it was a little vague, and no one else agreed. And that's been used to basically, we have troops all over the world now, drone strikes, this and that, and it all stems from that authorization for the use of force. So she would be the one
Yeah.
that I would support if I were in California. I forgot about Padilla, by the way. I've not heard that. You don't hear a lot about that guy.
You do not. So we'll see. But I also do like Katie Porter. It is a little. Sometimes I can see this. I've seen some criticism of her, like a little of her stuff in the House is a little grandstanding the way But I do like the
I
way
think it is. Yeah.
though she will bring CEOs of banks on there and shame them publicly. I think some of these guys need that. She's not afraid. So is it a little grandstanding? Yes, but given the nature of where we are in today's politics, I think someone emphasizing those points in a way that breaks it down and is easy for, I think, a mass audience to understand what the issues are. I think she does a good job in that. The same way I think like AOC does that. Like there's criticism of AOC out there, right? It's grandstanding this and that. But I think as a communicator, I think they have a skill set that they can communicate complex things down to a mass audience that makes them understandable and relatable, what the core issues are. So
Yeah. The
I do like
criticism of AOC now is that she's become too establishment, that she was sort of the outsider that was pushing the Democratic establishment. And now she's sort of lockstep in with everyone.
Well, I think what's tough about, like, for me, the way I see what I see about AOC is like, or anybody in that position, I guess, when people, because I don't think you can argue back and forth about the narrative of how she set herself up or whether people pumped her up to be this superstar of the left or this torchbearer for the left and progressive wing of the party, right? But I think at the end of the day, her job is to represent her constituents and get benefits for her constituency, right? So if your constituency wants nothing or needs nothing, then you can be the ideologue on the far left pushing nonstop. But if you need things for your constituency, you can't just be the far ideologue and martyr on every issue. You have to work, right? Like, you have to concede something, I think, in that job. That's the nature of the job. So no matter what she does, she's going to lose, right? She's going to get criticism. So I think I got to give her credit for trying to navigate that job as best she can and doing what she thinks is right. And no one's ever going to get it fully right. But I think what I like about Katie Porter, what I like about AOC, is they seem to be operating from a position of good faith. People are going to make wrong decisions. People are going to get things wrong. I think I saw an interview recently, I forget who it was, but just talking about, I think I was reading the clip about the Mitt Romney memoir that's coming out and talking about Ron Johnson from Wisconsin, right? And like Mitt Romney talks about Ron Johnson being like, yeah, he's crazy, but he's not a bad faith actor. He really does believe it.
Yeah, I read that.
Like, and he was like, what was the quote? He was like, Ron, is there a conspiracy you don't believe in? Like, yeah, he really believes
it. The exact quote.
But he's not a bad faith actor. He's not Ted Cruz. He's not Josh Hawley, right? You can work with someone of good faith. You can find common ground somewhere. But if someone is a bad faith actor, you can't do anything with that. It's just, what's that old John Stewart criticism he used to give of the GOP? It's like, wow, what an easy position to hold. It's like, government doesn't work. Elect us. We'll show you, right? Like, if that's your position, pretty easy to do. You just keep screwing things up and you'd be like, see, it doesn't work. Like, well, yeah, no shit.
What do you think will happen in 2024? You've got Trump facing 4 criminal trials. You have Biden, who a lot of Democrats are wondering whether he'll make it. Everyone seems to not have faith in Kamala Harris. Seems like it's going to be a rocky year for the country. There's a lot of it feels like it's very low likelihood that we'll have a kind of soft landing politically, to borrow a contemporary economic term.
Yeah, I think the one thing that gives me hope is as much noise and as much media attention the Trump stuff gets, which really has turned me off from following a lot of the mainstream news or trying to, like, I can't watch CNN, I can't watch MSNBC. It's all Trump all the time. Like, okay, it's like, well, there's now this order that it's like
breaking news.
Every
Trump
procedural
walked out of a building.
Right, like every procedural lawyer filing becomes a 4-hour analysis, and it's like, I don't really care. Like, like, I don't care. Let's talk about when the trial happens and is he guilty or not? What's the evidence, and is he guilty or not? Right. I think what gives me a little bit of hope is the polls consistently show that, there is that hardcore Trump base, right? Which kind of hadn't really thought about it. So now recently it was like, remember when the Iraq war started going bad and went really bad, and Bush still had that 30% approval rating, and you're like, who's this 30%? And it's just like,
Those
there's
people.
just that 25, 30% that you're not going to convince. It doesn't matter what the evidence is. It doesn't matter what reality is. They're in. They're true believers. It doesn't matter what you present in front of them. They don't, it does not matter. They're in. It's their guy. They don't really care. So you're dealing with basically, it's not somebody acting in good faith in the sense of like they're open to these about what reality is. Like they have their guy and that's that. So the polls that show that there's over 50% of the country thinks he should be on trial, and if he is guilty, he shouldn't be allowed to be president. That's a good sign. Whether or not those people turn out to vote because they're not excited about Biden is another thing. So it is possible that Trump wins again. Yes, I don't think he will, but it's very possible. Yeah, I mean, even the stuff with Hunter Biden, right? Like, oh, how could Hunter Biden do this? And I saw a couple of things that made me laugh today that I hadn't really thought about, but even just like they're busting them on gun registration laws. Like the party who wants no gun laws is trying to make sure Hunter Biden gets busted on this gun charge, right? For filing a gun
Yeah,
form
that kind
wrong.
of
And then,
divided them.
that's pretty silly. The fact that now, if he did something wrong, should he be charged? Yeah, should he, right? The deal is, from my understanding or what I've read, the deal he made wasn't unusual before they rescinded it. So
Oh,
whatever.
I
But
read
I
that it
mean,
was
yeah.
very unusual.
Oh, really? Okay. So
Yeah.
should he be prosecuted then? Yeah, he should be prosecuted. I mean, like, yeah, it's kind of ridiculous that you're the son of the
Well, I don't know
president
if he
and
should
you're
should
smoking.
be prosecuted, but the deal that they made that got withdrawn, apparently he made a deal with whoever was prosecuting him, Andrew Weiss or something, and the agreement was he would plead guilty to lesser charges. It was gun charges and tax charges, and then it would preclude the government from prosecuting him on other charges in the future, something vague like that. And everyone kind of signed off. So they took it to a judge, and which was a formality. The judge was supposed to sign off, and then everyone kind of goes their way. But the judge had never seen an agreement like that where you sort of waive off all these other crimes.
Oh,
So
future.
then, yeah, I don't know if it was future crimes or it was just other crimes that were sort of hanging in the air that he had been accused of. So she asked the prosecution, she said, does this actually prevent you from going after him for all these other charges that are kind of floating out there? And they got put on the spot. I think they were trying to sneak it in. And they said, no, of course not. We can still prosecute him for that. And then he and his defense counsel said, wait, that's not how we understand it. So the deal kind of fell apart when they shone a light on it.
With the judge. Okay.
Yeah, with the judge. But the
So,
charges themselves, like the gun charges, from what I understand, are it's illegal to buy a gun. He filled out an application and it said, have you ever been addicted to drugs? And at the, at the time he was
he's a drug addict who
on
said
crack.
no. Yeah.
Yes. And so he lied on the application. And so, yeah, he committed that crime. And in theory, he should be prosecuted for that. But there's a gun group that's actually contesting that law and they're trying to get it thrown out. They're taking it up to the Supreme Court. So the law that he's being prosecuted on might actually get thrown out of court, deemed unconstitutional altogether. So I think some Republicans who saw those charges think it's a little farcical because they think it'll all fall apart eventually. I'm not really sure. I think their fixation on Hunter Biden is pretty weird
I guess,
and obnoxious in the first place, but he
I guess
definitely
the thing
gets
to me,
shady stuff. So I guess he's an easy target.
I think though the fundamental thing though, if you want to talk about, what always gets me is like, for me it's the hypocrisy in the train of thought, right? If this is an issue for one person, it should be an issue for another person, right? The consistency in your thought. And so if it wasn't an issue for Ivanka and Jared Kushner to make all this money while they were still in office as the daughter and the son-in-law of the president and make these $1 million deals, and Ivanka still has her money and doing business in China and with her clothing line and all these sales, and they're personally benefiting off that. But there's no corruption. Of course, it's not corruption. These are quality people. And then, but somebody else on the other side, and now it's a major issue, and the president should be impeached for it. Like, what are we talking about, right? It's like that.
Yeah.
The hypocrisy in the train of thought is what gets me. It's like, there should be a consistency in how we approach things. If you want to be, that's what I'm talking about. good faith actors and not good faith actors, right? People just acting in bad faith for the sake of power. And that's what you see consistently is, I mean, that Mitt Romney thing was perfect, right? Talking about other GOP senators, like, I can't vote that way. Like, or when Trump came in after he got voted off the impeachment, he made a speech and they all laughed at him when he left the room. It's like, they're
Oh yeah.
enabling this, right? Like, these are just a bunch of people who have cushy corporate gigs. Essentially, it's like this. It sounds like the Senate's bought and paid for, and 80% of them can just keep cashing checks and don't have to do a damn thing. And I just don't want to lose this job. There's no interest in serving the American people, right? There's no real desire, and so, I mean, that's the thing. We go back to Citizens United and the fact that we have so much money in politics. Like, I remember years ago, Krugman had that, or it wasn't Krugman. It might have been Krugman quoting like Ezra Klein or Matt Iglesias talking about, you got to think as the government as an insurance company with an army, like how like 2/3 of the
says that a
budget
lot.
is Social Security and the military, right? And to me, I've less thought of it like that. And you got to think of America as a business that's open. It's everything's for sale, baby. America, like it, right? We can be bought and we can be sold. Like, we're all about that cash. Like, what's the money gonna do? And everything else doesn't matter. That seems to me to be the ethos of America. And kind of bringing it back to what I think the labor movement is doing is showing that there are people who do not want that, who are tired of living in that kind of structure where it's all about the money. And COVID let people get a break, I think, to reset and go, I don't want this. It's not value for me. It's not doing anything for my life. And I think we're getting that pushback. And then you see the people at the top who are, like I said, that guy, that CEO talking about, we got to remind these people that they work for us, that they got to be grateful for us. And my feeling is like, if you're the Ayn Rand type who's like, I'm going to take my ball and go, it's like, then go. We'll figure it out. We'll be okay. You can go. We don't need you. Like, you think you're that special. We'll figure it out, man. And there's so many other, there's so many other real problems that need to happen besides like wealth inequality, but just climate change. You're seeing it. Look at, I mean, it's been a little bit in the news, but Libya, what's happened in Libya? I mean, here in Hawaii, the Maui fires, and like, you look at the history of the Maui fire when they talked about it, was that area of Lahaina used to be, as my understanding was, that used to be lush. It was never a drought region, but when they colonized it, they rerouted rivers for the farmland, and that created that area to be a dry land. And then you have droughts in Hawaii that make it susceptible to these fires, and then it destroys a town, right? And there's a lot of issues there on top of it too. But like, climate change is like, these are the things that are happening, and we've been talking about it for 25 years now. About it's going to be this slow buildup. People are like, hey, it's not happening. Yet these storms are happening more and more. These fires are happening more and more. What was it? Last year, Central California was flooded through heavy rains. You get fires everywhere, right? Libya had, I think now the count was up to, was it?
It's like 11 or 15,000, I think.
15,000, like it was thousands dead, right? And destruction with these floods. And it's affecting these areas that don't have the infrastructure to handle it. And it's just going to happen more and more. And yet we still don't do anything really to effectively address these major problems that are going to destroy us all collectively as a species.
There's a surge in labor activity with the UAW, with SAG, and the other Hollywood unions, with, you mentioned UPS and Starbucks and all that.
Yeah,
do you
Teamsters,
think
Starbucks, Amazon?
Teamsters, is there hope for the future of the labor movement, or is this just a temporary post-COVID surge and you could have a Republican like Reagan come in and crush the union movement again?
No, I think there is hope. I see hope. I think one thing when the writers went on strike and then SAG went on strike, one thing that was funny was like reading, I forget what it was, but some producer posted a thing on Twitter, something that said like, because I remember when I was coming up, someone was telling me about how to run a set, and this guy was telling me, he's like, you can do this with the script and the schedule and the actor, all these things. He goes, there's one thing you do not fuck with, and that is the Teamsters. It was just like, you want to set to run smooth, do not fuck with the Teamsters. You just don't do it, right? And it's like, it's that when the workers have solidarity, and we're here to work, we're here to make a living, we want an honest pay for an honest day's work. That's, that's one of the phrases I've heard a lot in the labor movement is, hey, honest pay for honest work, man. Give me 8 hours pay for 8 hours labor. I'll give you that. I'll give you a full day, an honest day's work, but I deserve an honest day's pay. And I think we're working towards that. And when people are, it's difficult. I know this even just being when I was in the corporate world in the quote unquote business world of the American economy. When you're working at a place, in my mind, when you're working at a place of desperation, when you need that next job and you can't afford it, you take bad deals, right? When you have no safety net to hold you, you're grasping for anything. So all your energy is spent just treading water. You're just trying to catch the next breath. And so when you build that solidarity, when you're able to get a little bit of a leg to stand on, you can get a little more perspective on what the landscape is. And I think that's what's happening is I think COVID did a little of that on its own, was it made people stop having, right? And that those unemployment benefits that people were able to just kind of stay at home and finally catch a breath and not have to be grinding so hard. Also, you couldn't go do anything, right? You were just stuck. So you almost had to reflect. Getting that moment to see that, I think, kind of changed the landscape. And I think as this movement continues to build, that's only going to get stronger. At least that's what I hope. And I think as the gains continue to come, you're going to see that restructuring of how. I think that idea that, like I said, that CEO who went out there in that conference and talked about we need to get workers back in line. Like, whoa. There was.
And the fact that it came out, yeah. Or I guess he was at a public conference. Yeah.
He was at a public conference. He felt comfortable to say that. He felt comfortable to tell other business managers, we need to get these workers back in line where they belong. And it's even someone, I saw something that was a pretty funny meme about putting that a little clip that with a meme from, or the clip from A Bug's Life, where the grasshoppers are talking about how the ants outnumber us 1,000-1, right? And then when we decide as workers, well, we collectively stay together. That's the hard part, though, right? It's the Big Tent. How do we get everybody together to buy in? Because once it starts breaking, it can break apart pretty fast. But it's that buy-in, and I think you're seeing it. The way the Teamsters held together and got rid of their two-tier system with UPS between these workers, all right? The way the UAW is standing together strong in this and trying to get rid of that two-tier system. Basically, I don't know if you know about that two-tier system. So basically, you have people doing the same job but getting paid two different scales because they got in at different classifications or whatever.
Yeah, that was one of the concessions they made in 2008 for the UAW.
Right. So it's getting rid of that. It's like when we stand up together and say, no, we're not going to do that collectively. We're not going to allow this to happen. I think you're going to see a movement of that happening more and more and more. And I hope that, in my view, I hope that movement continues to shift the way the focus across the country away from capital into labor, right? And we'll see what happens. I mean, there's going to be a lot of, I don't think we've seen what the impact of AI is going to do on the service economy and the professional world, the way it's going to get rid of a lot of accountants and salespeople and customer service reps.
Yeah. Consultants.
And what is that going to do? And when those people go, I don't have a job anymore because my boss would rather pay this one-time fee for someone who's going to do my job at 80%, right? And take away my livelihood. Like, how are we going to manage that as a society? When the productivity comes, it's coming, right? How are we going to manage that collectively when the production comes, more production from less people? Are we going to have to move to a universal basic income, right? Are we going to move into more, or are you going to see more people move into content creation and arts and different things and pursuing their path? I don't know what that's going to look like. Excuse me. I do know though, like, our infrastructure is a big problem, and we're talking about shortages with the trades coming in the next 5 to 10 years. And we're also looking at a massive information loss in the trades because, excuse me, the number of people who've been doing it, those people are retiring, and we don't have the numbers to replace them as those people are retiring. So the information loss we're going to get is going to be pretty drastic, I think. But are we going to start moving people away from, you're starting to see it, right? The return on college isn't there. So you're going to see more people try to start moving into the trades and picking up some of these things. And it's funny, climate change is coming, and it makes me start thinking existentially about well, what is a real skill set that's going to be of value, right? Is it going to be, can we navigate how to build and how to live in a world that is constantly changing, or is it going to be how to make sales, right? Like
Yeah,
what's the
that's a
real
good
skill
point.
set that's going to be applicable, that's going to help you survive in the world that's coming to us? I don't know the answer. Those are all big question marks that we'll see as it develops. But I think those are questions sometimes people are not asking, or I think some of that too. I'd like to see that change. Is the question of value? Who's really bringing value to the American economy, American society? What's right? The way teachers get looked at. I mean, that was another big thing I thought was COVID was funny, was people used to get mad at teachers and they have the summer off and why are they going on strike to get ways? And then all of a sudden people had to stay home with their kids for more than a weekend at a time, and they're going, like, get my kids out of here. Like, can we
But
schools
then
back
they
open
got
because
mad
I don't
at
want to be around their
the
kids?
teachers unions because a lot of
Right,
the
because the
teachers
teachers.
unions were reluctant. I got annoyed with some of the teachers unions that, particularly, I think Chicago is one where they were really dragging their feet on going back to in-person learning. And then you had all this learning loss strongly felt on the most marginalized communities because they weren't in school for, I mean, I didn't want to go down that path because I generally support the teachers unions, but
No, I think at
I
that
think
point it all
that
becomes
was
like, no, it's is it an unfortunate thing that students are in that, like, it always happens. The most marginalized communities are the ones that are most affected by crisis.
yeah, by
That always
everything.
happens, right? By
By
everything.
definition, yeah.
But right, that unfortunately is the case of the way we've structured our societies, our Western society. Also, I don't know, but I think I don't think from a work perspective, from a labor perspective, I don't think it's unreasonable for teachers to say, wait a second, if everyone at home is not going to follow these rules that we think could jeopardize our lives, and we're not going to be compensated for taking on this additional risk, like, you want us to come back without compensating us for this thing? Like, wait a second, time out. Like, how was that legitimate? How was that fair? Because that's our role. Like, you're just going to think, well, that's your role and that's what you chose, so do it. Like, no, time out. We're not playing that game, right? And that's, I see their perspective. Like, yeah, it's unfortunate that the most marginalized take on the most impact and the most damage, but also I think those people, in terms of, if we're going to structure that as this is a labor market and these are people who go do this job, right? It's also a passion for them. I don't think they did it like, we want to hurt kids, but from a perspective of, this is what I do for my job, right? Like, hey, do I take this back home to my family? Do I put my family at risk for these things? Like, is that unreasonable for them to ask those questions or demand those things? I don't think so.
I know we've been on for a while, so just in the final stretch, I had a few off-topic, kind of random questions for you,
Yes,
if you're so open to it.
I am.
Do you feel like you found purpose or passion in life?
Yes, I think, me personally, certain things I struggle with. We all have ups and downs and stuff, and sometimes it's like, man, maybe this wasn't the path, and maybe I should be doing something different and reset it all. But generally, for the most part, I feel pretty happy. I kind of stumbled into this career and this choice. Like, I think the work is good. I enjoy the work, but the being part of, I think, the labor movement is something that has been like spiritually sustaining, like feeling like I'm not part of a cog in the machine that I don't believe in, that I think is hurting the economy or hurting a society. Like, being a part of an organization I was talking to a friend about this. One of the things I think is really cool about the labor movement is, even with, I think, a lot of the trades and stuff, being not just labor movement, but specifically in the trades, it's a male dominated industry, right? And I would say it's probably a pretty conservative industry as well. But one of the things that's kind of amazing you see about what changes people's mindsets, and not always in direct ways or quick ways, but you can be on a job site with a lot of guys who are pretty conservative and maybe don't have the greatest mindset or acceptance towards people who are LGBTQIA, right? And it's like, okay, but now you got to work with that person and you got to get this project done. Like, you find a way and you start building a rapport with that person. And this doesn't always happen, right? There are issues where you got to deal with certain people get harassed and things like that, and we're changing that in the industry overall. But I think one of the things that it does when you're forced to work next to somebody, you're exposed to somebody as a person, not as this weird idea of a thing, right? And so there's times where I've met guys, and over the years they've worked with someone, and then they didn't realize that person was gay, and then they find out a year later that person's gay, but like, wait, what? Oh, I don't mean that person. No, that person's cool. It's like, yeah, but that's all people like that, right? And it's that exposure to someone that you get to build relationships with. You get to know a person individually that I think slowly changes the mindset of people overall towards a group, right? You can have a bias towards a group, and then all of a sudden you meet one person and you form a relationship with that person, and that opens you up to that changes your mindset about a group because, oh, but that person's not like that. This idea you have or this stereotype of a group. I think the labor movement's great at that. When we say, I don't care what you believe, we all have a right to go earn a living wage, and we're going to fight for that, right? I cannot like you. I can disagree with you socially, politically, religiously, but at the end of the day, I'm going to stand up for your right to go find a living wage job, to be able to earn a living for yourself and your family. And that's the number one thing. That's my mindset, at least. I don't know if everyone shares that, but that's my outlook on the labor movement. Is that's what we should be fighting for, is the right of every individual to go make a living wage so they can live their life how they see fit. And that's what we should be protecting, right? And nothing should be disrupting your ability to go make a living for yourself if you want to.
What is your favorite movie
Ooh, favorite movie
of all time?
Of all time. Tough. I
Yeah,
like
you can name
action
a
flicks
couple.
a lot. I like a lot of action flicks. I think like I get a sucker for certain sappy movies like Forrest Gump. Really love Forrest Gump.
It's a good one.
I really like Wes Anderson's Royal Tenenbaums. Is one of a movie I really enjoy.
It's one of
Action movies. Let me take it back on you. Die Hard, Christmas movie or not a Christmas movie?
I don't want to go down that debate. Probably a Christmas movie because they always have it on every Christmas.
Die Hard's a classic, classic action movie that's awesome. Yeah, I guess it just depends on the mood I'm in. I recently saw something I really liked was Triangle of Sadness, which I thought was really good. I thought that was pretty interesting. And it kind of really just a take on class and beauty and privilege, which I thought was pretty interesting, that I really enjoyed. But yeah.
What are you watching now, TV or streaming wise, that you'd recommend?
That I recommend. Oh, recently I just finished the second season of the show Foundation, which is an Apple TV show based on the Isaac Asimov books. And I'm a fan of sci-fi and fantasy. And I turned on figuring like, it'll be something I could just put on the background. And I ended up getting sucked into it. I thought it was really, really good. I really enjoyed it. I would recommend that.
And then what's the kind of closing question? What's the best place you've ever traveled to?
My
That
favorite
you'd go back
places,
to?
My favorite places that I've ever been is probably a tie between New Orleans and a town in the Basque Country in Spain, northern Spain, called San Sebastian. San Sebastian I've only been to twice, and it's probably been already about 15, 20 years since I've been there. It's about 15 years since I've been to San Sebastian, but New Orleans I've been to. I just got back from New Orleans a few weeks ago. It was my fourth time there. But those are two towns I really enjoy. San Sebastian's more quaint, more quiet, a lot of history, beautiful. The Basque people, the Basque culture I really enjoy. And New Orleans because I'm just a fan of the music, the food. I think it's a wonderful city. It's a underrated U.S. city. A lot of history, a lot of culture. It's one of my favorite places.
All right. Well, Michael Valdes, thank you for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.